Welcome back to the Changemaker podcast. I'm your host, Deke, Copenhaver. Today, my guest is my good friend, Charles Knox Jr., second-time guest.
That's right.
So I think with the third time, you get like a smoking jacket or something.
Good, okay.
Charles grew up in Augusta, Georgia, and came up through the children's and youth ministry of Trinity on the Hill. His family is very active here. After graduating, and that's an understatement. After graduating from Wake Forest University, Charles received his master's degree in ministry from Asbury Theological Seminary. For 2 years, he worked in Athens, Georgia, at the University of Georgia Wesley Foundation. In his free time, Charles enjoys playing tennis, pickleball, and any kind of competition. I love this. He especially loves competing against middle and high school boys and teaching them the biblical principle of humility. In 2022, Charles returned home to Augusta and to Trinity and has absolutely loved the opportunity to invest in the next generation here. Charles works in student ministry alongside his wife, Julia. They married in 2023 and are living out a calling from God to invest in the spiritual lives of young men and women. In 2024, Charles was ordained as a deacon in the Global Methodist Church. Charles, you were expecting your child, but you need to update your bio.
That's right.
Charles and Julia are new parents, so congratulations on that, man. But
thank you.
Welcome, Charles. Glad to have you back.
Welcome to the Changemaker podcast, hosted by Deke Copenhaver. Deke is the author of The Changemaker, a Forbes publishing book that has reached #1 on Amazon on multiple occasions and in multiple categories like management skills and total quality management. During this podcast, Deke interviews exceptional change-making leaders. Deke currently operates Copenhaver Consulting, where he helps local governments and other public organizations maximize their potential. He's also a sought-after public speaker. We hope that The Changemaker has an impact on you today and that you find takeaways that make you a better leader in your life. Now, here's Deke.
Thank you. 4 months into parenthood.
So how's that going for you so far?
Pretty much mastered it by now.
Oh, you've mastered it.
No, it's about every other day you think, we've got this, we know exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
And then the next day or middle of the night, it's just humble pie over and over.
No, you know, it's funny. I think being humbled is a really good thing. Mm-hmm. And it's funny. I think I had told you one time that then when I got diagnosed, I'm like, well, I didn't mean really die.
Yeah.
But that's a pretty humbling situation. But
for sure.
I think humility is a good thing. And I want to get your take on this because I've had this conversation with a lot of people recently that, okay, the greatest servant leader to ever walk the face of the earth is our risen Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. So, and the master, the OG of grassroots engagement. But it's interesting in a time when, people perceive humility, kindness, warmth, all of those are looked at by a lot of people in the world as weakness. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, those are all the traits that I want to try to emulate, and I don't think that there's anything weak about that.
Mm-hmm. Jesus had so much more glory and power and even authority in some meanings of the word when he was in heaven. The Bible says that he got rid of all of that. He gave all of that up, humbled himself to come take on human flesh.
Yeah.
And I like what you said about the grassroots, the OG. What'd you say? He's the greatest grassroots leader of all time.
The OG of grassroots engagement.
That's right. I mean, there were so many instances where his disciples or his followers felt like there was a good moment to go public or to go big, or maybe Jesus had spent all day in a town healing people. And from a human point of view, the people around him thought this could be the time to make our move.
Yeah.
To get a mass following, to fill out the stadiums and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And he would run away from the crowds. He was only interested. He loved the crowds. I read a great book recently that said Jesus loved the crowds and his disciples equally, but he loved them differently.
Yeah.
So when people would try to make him king by force or put a crown on his head or get him to go do what he did for the 5,000, day after day, he would run away from that. and just continue to invest in a few people.
You know, it's interesting. I read a book recently called Restoring Sanity, which talks about forming islands of sanity. And so Jamie Winship, a Christian minister, the book is not a Christian book, but said that's effectively what Jesus and the disciples did was they formed an island of sanity in the middle of an empire, and it spread out from there. So one of the things I had mentioned to you, I'm on the advisory board for the Forward Party. So I'm recruiting mayors to join us, who a lot of, it turns out, are strong believers. But I've started saying, you know, in the chaos and the insanity that we see in the world these days, what if we as mayors, as the CEO of your city, focused on developing your city into an island of sanity? Because the great case study of how that worked out, you know, goes back a long ways.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. I think we've talked before about social media and the effects of social media. And that just kind of makes me think, when we're trying to create an island of sanity here in Augusta, we're trying to bring solutions to Augusta, but every day, especially young people, are faced with the problems of the entire world. It's not a very fair fight in terms of the negative content we're all being fed. We're being told that we need to care about every disaster in every city, but we can't help every disaster in every city.
No, and that's the point that I make, is that 99.9% of the people that live in this country will never have any impact on what goes on in Washington.
Right.
But the world begins outside your front door. So we have a phenomenal opportunity. So we've got a Hurricane Helene long-term recovery group that, and I'll tell you this story. Maybe I did tell you this story, but 4 months ago, I was praying and I said, Lord, you know, I do handshake agreements with people, probably not the best business strategy. My father would probably tell me that, and your father, who's my friend, and my broker would probably tell me that. But I'm like, and then I don't get compensated when it was agreed to. But it was like the Lord told me, he said, I got you through 9 years in office unscathed, which 9 years in politics to come out unscathed is pretty unusual.
Yeah, sounds like a miracle.
I brought you through cancer unscathed. You've never gone without, just do the work. And I'm like, okay, God, well, every day I'm going to seek your kingdom first and work on working with others to build your earthly kingdom. So I went and had a drink with your dad, Charlie Knox, and said, Charlie, I told him that story and I said, it's probably not a great investment strategy, but that's what we're going to do. So the next day, the chairman of the long-term recovery committee, so we went to lunch. And he said, Shell Knox Berry, he said, she called me like 20 minutes ago and said that there's funds set aside in a grant we're getting to bring on somebody to be the director of this effort for the next 18 months. She said, well, do you think that's Deke? And so I'm like, man, if Melissa clears it, I'm all in. So your dad called me like 10 minutes after lunch to tell me about a trade he had made. And I'm like, hey, Charlie, you know that Seeking God's Kingdom First? It really works.
Yeah, imagine that.
Imagine that. But I want you to tell our listeners and our viewers, because you gave me this idea, we are intentionally including and reaching out to the younger generation of Augustans to be volunteers and to get out there on the street. But that idea came from you when you told me about the experience you had following the storm with your young man.
Yeah, the days after the hurricane hit were crazy from a personal standpoint, but also in terms of church leadership.
Yeah.
You feel this responsibility to tell everyone what to do, because everyone's coming to you and asking, what do we do? And being in a denomination, like I'm sure every denomination experienced this, but every Methodist church within, 200 miles south of us, and then Asheville was kind of receiving the same kind of love from Northern Methodist churches, are calling us and saying, we're on the way with a bunch of 18-wheelers full of food and water. We're coming to your church. So there was that responsibility to steward all of that really well. And I think with young people, a lot of times we we try to pull young people in. Sometimes it feels like for a photo op or because it just, I don't know, seems like the right thing to do. But kids couldn't go to school. And before I was even asking them to come, they were showing up to our church and helping figure out how we were going to form the assembly line. And our church became just an outpost, like so many places were in our community, where we just had lines out the door every day of people who needed water, hygiene products, all kind of canned goods and everything. The high school boys were, I think, the most helpful population out there, just from a physical standpoint.
Yeah.
I mean, when you have an 18-wheeler full of bottled water, and that is extremely heavy.
Yeah.
and they're just, every day just carrying that inside and passing out to people over and over. And that was the physical labor, helping out part, but the spiritual side that was really powerful is a lot of our middle school girls. They weren't as much into the carrying heavy stuff, but they would kind of be these like escort or chaperone people who showed up who were in need. They would kind of walk them through the line and help them get everything, and then they would walk them to their car. And I can't claim responsibility for this, but some of the people in our church or our community started coaching them up on how to pray for people, how to, or just offer, hey, could I pray for you? And thousands of people that we helped, not one person says, no, you can't pray for me, because people know. Yeah. And that's one of the best things. There's not many great things about a humbling disaster like that, but it does bring all of us kind of back to our knees. And middle school girls were able to minister to people in a way that a pastor can't, because we're inside being in charge for whatever that means. So the people who are actually there as they're putting food into their car happen to be middle school girls, and they stepped up. They prayed for people.
We're coming up on the year anniversary, but so everybody that we've asked to be a part of the recovery efforts, and basically what I'm saying is telling people, I'm like, if you genuinely want to help our community, we don't need any hidden agendas, but if you genuinely want to help serve, we will find a spot for you. So everybody that we've approached in helping out in these recovery efforts, it hasn't been a lukewarm response. It's like people felt that energy of coming together and sharing and meeting neighbors you didn't meet, that you'd never met before. So everybody is like raising their hand because they want to feel that way again. So I honestly believe the Holy Spirit is doing an amazing work here. So one of the things that we've done is we've brought in Scott Parrish with the United Methodist Group has been so good about bringing in all of these national faith-based relief organizations. So we've got just this coalition of, we've got Catholics, Baptists, Methodists, we've got all Presbyterian. I'm about to get Episcopalian. But like the main group that people want to get is Mennonite Disaster Services. Because they literally, they work from dawn to dusk. They know what they're doing. They're highly skilled laborers. So we have Mennonite Disaster Services coming in November. They will be here through March. Then we have Christian Disaster Services coming in December. They will be here through March. So the good that we're about to unleash in this community, because these people, the labor is free. We're funding the supplies with grant funds. But I think what an opportunity to show God's love throughout our community.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think when people serve a lot of times, whether it's local missions or international mission trips, people get some kind of good feeling or sense that they served. And that's a valuable thing. But I think sometimes as the church, we've failed to teach people that service and helping out people was Jesus's mode of evangelism.
Exactly.
Like Jesus never separated, today I'm going to help people who are poor, hungry, orphans, widows, and tomorrow I'm going to preach the gospel. They were one and the same for him. And so I don't even think he had, and I don't want to get, heretical on you, but I don't think Jesus had too much of an agenda weeks, months out.
No.
He had a mission for sure that he never deviated from, but you see in scripture so many times where he's headed towards one place and then he runs into someone with a need.
Yeah.
Completely changes his day, probably his week. And he's not bothered by it at all. That he's like, well, this is how I'm going to spread the kingdom of God today, is meet this need.
Well, and that's, as I say, the greatest servant leader of all time. That's who, we will all fall short. Mm-hmm. But if that's who we're trying to model our leadership after, mm-hmm. and I tell people, he did not lead from the C-suite or from a gated community. Mm-hmm. He was out there on the street. He's mm-hmm. with saints, with sinners, with prostitutes, with tax collectors. So I just think, and I've often said to people, and I'll get your take on this. I said at my church one time, I said, if Jesus' table is open to everybody, who are we as churches or individuals to put limitations on who can join us mm-hmm. at that table?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Jesus made a lot of religious leaders mad in his day.
Yes, that is completely true. Well, that's one of the things, though, that I'm hoping to see, and I want to get your take on this if you think this is possible. So many of these faith-based relief organizations have worked together in other communities, mm-hmm. and they made the point, they said, we work together in ecumenical fashion. So I'm hoping, because it's not just at Augusta, but a lot of churches seem to be kind of inward-facing. Mm-hmm. You've got the gym, you've got all this stuff, and mm-hmm. I'm like, you've got to be out there on the street to minister. Mm-hmm. But I'm hoping that our local churches, seeing these different faith traditions working together across all lines of difference in ecumenical fashion mm-hmm. will be inspirational.
Yeah. I think with church on Sunday, people get very focused on the theological beliefs and the differences there. And then anytime there's something that causes us to get out and help people, it's just kind of gets you beyond your walls.
Yeah.
And it's a personal story. I was scheduled to preach the week of the hurricane. And I think it happened maybe on a Friday, if I'm remembering correct.
It happened on a Friday. You're exactly right.
Woke up on Friday. So that was obviously the last thing on my mind. But,
yeah.
We figure out pretty quick, church isn't possible this Sunday.
Yeah.
So the powers that be just said, all right, well, you'll preach next week. So I was praying so hard, like, what do I preach on? Like, we still didn't have power. Most people still didn't have power. A few people were able to get to church that next Sunday, but God put this passage in Jeremiah 29 on my heart, and it's written to a bunch of Israelites who are in exile in Babylon. So they've lost everything. Their home, they've watched their homes be burned down and all of their cattle slaughtered and a lot of their friends and family killed. And then they're dragged off into exile. And the message God has for them, we always quote the famous kind of somewhat cliche verse, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, which is great. Mm-hmm. But if you read on the entirety of that passage, God tells them to plant roots, to get married, to raise children, and to pray and work for the welfare of the city that they're now in.
Yep.
God doesn't say, go sit in exile and be resentful and just think about what's been broken.
Yeah.
Even though they are dragged away into exile because of their sinfulness, God still wants his people to be a light. And part of his salvation plan for the world was to take his people into different places, even in harsh circumstances like Egypt and Babylon. So that's what I preached on, and I was like crying the entire time. Thankfully, the technology wasn't working, so there's no video of this, no record of it.
Well, I know I did see a video of one of your sermons, but I guess not that one.
Yeah. Was it one where I was crying the entire time?
I don't think so.
Okay, yeah. That's the only time that's happened. But it was just such an emotional and powerful Sunday morning because it was different than every other Sunday morning. Not all the lights were working. Not all the equipment was working. Not all the people were able to be there. People that our church members, some had been killed, everyone had a friend or a family member who had been killed.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, you want me to preach right now? Like, that's the last thing on my mind. But that was part of his plan. And I think that passage was so fitting because there is a lot of darkness only in Augusta. You don't have to look at the rest of the world.
Yeah.
But God says you need to pray and work for the welfare of the city that you're in. And you need to marry and raise children here and fight for the good of the people around you, even if your circumstances aren't what you would have drawn them up to be.
Well, it's interesting to me. So I often have said that I tell people, okay, I'm on the board of our development authority. Mm-hmm. We're bringing in literally billions of dollars of economic investment into Augusta. So purportedly, we are the second most churched city in America, I guess, per capita. We have great nonprofits. You know, we've got a lot of wealth in our community, but yet our poverty rate has been 20% or over probably for 2 decades. And so the United Way has a designation now. It's called ALICE, Asset Limited, Income Constrained, but Employed. So effectively, that's the working poor.
It's my daughter's name, by the way.
Oh, really?
I'll tell her what it stands for when she grows up.
Don't tell her that.
That's why we named it.
But so prior to the storm, 59% of people that live in Augusta proper are either the working poor or poor. And I can only imagine after the storm, I mean, we still have people a lot of people that were really impacted were older people who had paid their house off and couldn't afford insurance. But I've said, so we're a city, you know, we labor under a mindset of scarcity when we serve a God of abundance. I'm like, we are a city that oftentimes labors under a mindset of scarcity when we are a city of abundant resources. But I think in the recovery, we can sequence those together because we've got good people who care about their community. And a lot of people, I think the storm pulled back the veil. They're like, I didn't know that people were living in those conditions. So I think we're going to come through this so much stronger because I believe in our community, and I believe people like yourself are committed to doing what God instructed us to do.
Yeah, if the church was operating at full strength and we were one of the most church cities in America, we would be fine.
Yes.
So there's something broken with the church, just like with politics, with every institution. And that's the sad thing is people look to the church to know the truth. And, you know, like any institution that's run by humans, the scriptures say it's supposed to be founded on Jesus.
Yeah.
But too often we use Jesus's name, we stamp it on something. And this isn't me. I'm not anti-church. I work for a church. But I think this is an opportunity for us to relearn ourselves, or maybe learn for the first time what the church really is. It's just a gathering of people that's called together to be the hands and feet of Jesus.
That is exactly it. And I'll tell you, our last interview impacted me in a lot of ways. So I've got a lady that I connected with in San Diego. Her name is Nicole Jansen. She was just a guest on the show. But she does leadership coaching and everything, but she's a strong believer. But she has all these businesses, these CEOs that she works with. So we've started a cohort that we're going to talk next week with our first group of CEOs. How do you walk your faith in the position of a CEO? Because it came from when we were talking, I was like, you know, we need more Christians. I mean, people walking the walk in the business community. I mean, in the marketplace, in ministry, in politics. But you've got to walk the walk. And it's not, Ethan and I, my producer and I were like, it is not easy to be a Christian. I mean, I don't think it's, you know, the prosperity gospel doesn't really cut it for me.
Well, if Christianity is true, which I'm confident it is.
Me too.
Then we are the only ones truly fighting the darkness.
Yeah.
And that means that the darkness, the devil, the enemy, he has one main target, and that's the church. That's God's people. He wrecks so many lives across all religions, and And I think he probably rejoices at everyone's suffering, but we're the ones that are supposed to do something about it. And regardless of whatever other people believe, like when the Israelites were in Babylon, the Babylonians certainly weren't worshiping the one true God.
No.
And yet God tells his people, I want you to go and I want you to pray and work for their welfare, for their benefit. And it's by that kind of selfless love that people will come to a relationship with the one true God.
Well, I'm thrilled with Pope Leo, what I've seen so far, because it's nice for me to see, an American-born world leader talking about peace and loving our neighbors, and not just our Christian neighbors, loving all of our neighbors. I'm like, I think that message needs to be heard right now. But I saw recently where, what was it? He met with like 1 million youth. So it's interesting. And the media has a narrative that we are horribly broken, we can never be healed, which you and I know that that's not true. And there is a lot of, there's a lot of bad out there in the world. I mean, we recently, yesterday, had the political assassination of Charlie Kirk. But I would say that, violence begets more violence. And so violence is never going to heal us. Love is the only thing that can do that.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes back to our social media feeds.
Yeah.
Young kid, I mean, it's really heartbreaking, but there are young kids, like teenagers, who don't, I mean, they kind of assume that their world is going to end sometime soon because of a nuclear bomb or something.
Yeah.
And obviously I wasn't alive in the Cold War, but it kind of reminds me of whoever is a teenager in a time with a ton of uncertainty in the world and a ton of unrest. Those people are affected way more than adults because their brains aren't completely developed.
Oh, yeah.
And young people are reading all of this, watching all of this stuff on their social media. And it's very profitable for people out there for us to continue watching and clicking and scrolling. But it's very nihilistic. Right. No,
and but it's funny, I will tell you this, Charles. So I went dove hunting last weekend in Thompson with Larry Knox, your cousin, and Julian and Jack and Michael. But I had told Julian Barrett, I had lunch with Jane before I came here. She said to tell you hello.
Yeah.
About getting off of social media. And he said, when we were coming home, he said, so you got off of social media? I said, yeah. And I told him why. He said, well, I'm thinking about doing that too. He said, because, Snapchat, it's almost like you're exhausted by the time you do it. But I think part of what seeing younger people start to come to the church is because it's authentic and it's nourishing. And the social media feed is just, that's saccharine, and it's not, whatever high you get, it doesn't last long. And so I think over time, I'm hoping that we're seeing, because the pendulum can only swing so far one way for so long, but I hope we're seeing that young people starting to sort of wake up.
That's right. A lot of the church or forms of church that I hear from young people are more and more enticing and popular are the oldest ones, the most traditional ones. I've talked to a lot of young guys who are interested in early Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy, or just a liturgical form of Methodism or Anglicanism or Episcopalianism or whatever. I think sometimes when we try to be so cool and relevant, and whenever kids see through that, and if we're really going to, and I've wrestled with this with my leadership teams, especially as we're thinking about putting on a retreat or a camp, are we really going to try to compete with Snapchat and Netflix and YouTube? But we have the words of the one true God. We have thousands of years of tradition of, in the face of incredible persecution and darkness, people are, they can be being martyred for their faith, and they're singing praise to God because there's something in there that you can't compete with. So we intentionally try to not go after the most exciting stuff. And we don't market even youth hangouts anymore as there's going to be a bouncy house and pizza and this and that, because it's just not as exciting as what they have at their fingertips. We can't compete with all that.
No, and it's so much more nourishing. That's why I like podcasts. And so the young man, William Hollingsworth, so you might know William, Melissa and I had dinner with he and Camden Boardman. But William was talking about, because I was taping a podcast the next day, he said they say that podcasts are helping to increase my generation's attention span because we're listening to them the whole time. And it's like people will go to an alternative if they're given it. And so I don't, I'm excited about what's going on in your generation. I'm excited to have a chance to engage them in our recovery efforts here. But two, there's so much more out there at the grassroots level that you're not seeing in the media or politics. So do you know the nation, if I'm correct in this, where people are coming to faith faster than any other?
I just know the regions of the world.
Iran.
Yeah.
And
it's anywhere where there's persecution, where it's not popular at all to follow Christ. That's where it grows.
Well, and the thing to me, though, is what I've come to believe is that in those nations, too, they are not distracted by social media or the media. So it's, we're in the West, we're just so distracted all the time. But if you want to intentionally turn down the noise, it is possible to do. And I'm so glad that Julian asked me that question. But that's part of the reason why I got off of social media. You helped me take the plunge after our first interview. But I thought, if I'm going to talk to, we've got 13 nieces and great nieces and nephews, a lot of teenagers in there now. But if I'm going to have a conversation with them on, this is what you need to think about with social media, and this is why, it cuts my position if they're like, well, you're still on Instagram, but I'm producing good content. I'm like, so in order for me to have a valid conversation, I had to go ahead and, take the plunge first.
That's right. I'm glad you did. Not to pick on your generation, but I think sometimes a lot of adults, just in general, I guess, across generations, don't even realize how addicted they are.
No.
And while the teenagers are certainly very addicted, they're aware of it. They're aware of it. We on a middle school camp, we take all their phones away day one when we get there. Of course, we tell them why. We want to have real, authentic human relationships and just encounter God here and all this stuff. And there's some whining and complaining on day one, but so many kids at the end of the trip, 6 days later, say, thank you for taking our phones away. Because that's the first time all year that they had a prolonged time of meaningful relationships.
Well, it's very interesting to me. So I replaced my doom scrolling and time on social media with reading and listening to good podcasts and all. But I think it was a podcast I was listening to that said basically all the social media executives in Silicon Valley send their kids to schools where they don't have access to social media. And I'm like, hello, if that's not a little bit of a red flag for you, they know the danger of it and they don't want to expose their own kids to it. But as long as I'm making billions of dollars, I'll feed it to other kids.
Right.
We're
starting to see that here. Yeah. More and more schools are getting serious about phones.
Well, I think that's a good thing. I told Melissa I was going to go to a flip phone, but I've not taken that drastic step yet. But I will be honest, I've not missed it in the least. But you can rewire your brain too. So as I say, I've been reading voraciously, but I was listening to or reading something recently that said that being on your phone all the time, it cuts into your ability to be able to sit down with a book and read for a long period of time. And I just heard that recently. I'm like, when I started reading, a lot, I noticed that. I could just not sit still with a book for any given length of time.
That's right.
So now I'm doing this being the director of the long-term recovery group. So there is a manual for VOADs, volunteer organizations active in disasters. It's 133 pages long, and it's kind of dry. I know that's going to shock you, but I'm like, okay, I'm better prepared because I've been doing a lot of reading. I can get through this thing.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, man, we could talk all day, and I would love to, and we will, but still want to come speak to your youth group about getting involved in all this. And one of the things I want people to see is I want to witness the Mennonites and the Christian disaster relief folks out there working, because I think that sets an example. And I think watching people do something amazing like that, and they are amazing, is a lot cooler than a YouTube video.
100%.
In my mind, it's 100%. A real life YouTube video.
Yeah. Well, bad news just sells better than good news, just in general. So when you're talking about generations, everyone's going to focus on what each generation is terrible at. And there's a lot to pick apart with the younger generations, but we don't give them credit. I think they're, I hope to be part of this. Maybe I'm a little older than them, but just the most aware generation of the importance of health. Yeah. So mental health, physical health, so much of what the content creators are pushing now. It's just a healthy lifestyle. And I hope it catches up and eventually gets us stopping watching all those videos, because we're just out in the world living the way that we were designed to live. There's only so many self-help videos or books you can read before you're supposed to do something with it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I never want a sermon or teaching at youth group or a podcast or anything to just be another content created about how whatever. I mean, at some point, if we're going to be Christians, we have to take someone's hand, walk them to a need, and teach them how to meet that need.
Well, it's walking your faith. And so, a while back, I decided, okay, most people want to try to somehow make a podcast profitable. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, I'm going to go in the opposite direction. I don't want any sponsors. I don't want any outside influence on this. I just want this to be pure information, talking to people, that there's no financial motivation. Once again, one of Deke Copenhaver's tremendously terrible business models, but hopefully it's serving to build the kingdom.
That's right. Yeah. Jesus wasn't the best businessman, in the eyes of the world.
That is true. Well, so your dad told me one time that your granddad and my brother-in-law, Larry Knox, Boone Knox, that they are good church-going men, believe in God, give money to the church, but finances are secular. And I'm like, I'm sorry, man. It's nothing is secular to me. It's all intertwined.
That's right. You're just supposed to bring whatever you have and hold it with loose hands and open it up to God and see what he tells you to do with it.
Well, that's what I told you, Dad. I'm like, just make sure I don't go broke.
Yeah.
Well, Charles, as we get down to the end, so where can people find you?
So I'm the youth pastor at Trinity on the Hill Methodist Church. I love the opportunity to invest in people, talk with people, whether it benefits my ministry or not. That's something I'm really trying to grow in and emphasize is not just try to build church members, but build disciples, and not just build up my church or my church programs, but build up the kingdom of God, see what happens, and just trust that the people above me continue, and I know they will, just to see the value in that. If people are looking for me on social media, good luck. I have social media accounts, but I'm only given a minute a day on each one with my screen time.
Well, see, you're a good influence on me. You've rubbed off on me in a lot of ways. Yeah. And that's what I'm like. I'm like, every generation has something to teach. And so I've learned so much. I had Ethan was my last, we had an interview canceled, and so I interviewed my producer who's 29 years old. But I'm like, we can all learn from each other, and cross-generational learning simply rocks, in my opinion.
I appreciate that humility. Yeah.
Well, so now the last question, and I wonder what it will be, on a daily basis, what puts a smile on your face and brings joy to your heart?
I don't know who wrote that bio that you read. I would think my wife must have worked some of that about competing and teaching humility or something.
Yeah.
What puts a smile on my face? I've had 3 or 4 different conversations or relationships with guys in their 20s and 30s in the last few months, all of whom are searching, who aren't happy with the current state of what the church is offering, at least where they are.
Yeah.
There are so many people, and a lot of my middle and high schoolers are just looking for something that stood the test of time.
Yep.
It takes a lot of pressure off of me because we don't have to create anything. You know, we've been given God's word, and you just pass that on.
Yeah.
Jesus's method for changing the entire world was to spend 3 years discipling, investing in a few people.
Yep.
There were probably millions and millions and millions of people on earth when he was on earth. He never met more than maybe 1,000 of them. And that didn't seem to bother him in the slightest. So, yeah, I just want to invest in whatever people God's put in my life, my wife, my daughter. And the New Testament says, make every effort to live a peaceable life and to work hard with our hands and provide for our family. And doesn't say anything about build a huge following. So
no, it doesn't say
avoid
that you have to have 1 million followers on TikTok.
That's right.
I don't think that's in there. No, but I do agree with you. I'm like, everything starts small and grows from there. And it's like, change isn't going to come from a stadium full of, I mean, people that are just fans of one team or the other or whatever.
That's right.
It starts on the street and it starts at your front door.
That's
so
right.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to doing some kingdom building with you, my friend.
Absolutely. You know, I heard someone say that heaven is full, like the greatest saints in heaven are people that you and I have never heard of.
Yep.
Just humble people who lived in a certain community, could have been Augusta in the 21st century, and just answered God's call to love the people around them. And we think that the heroes of heaven are going to be the ones like the Billy Grahams of the world. And yes, God used him in amazing ways, but it just doesn't really seem like that's how God's working right now in our city. And so for all the young people, 15-year-old guy or whatever, God has an incredible plan for that person in our city. And there doesn't have to be a ton of recognition or applause or profit that comes from it.
No.
If you obey God, if you're faithful to what he's called you to do, that's one of the main teachings of Christianity. Work for a reward in heaven, not on earth.
Exactly. So, I think that's a great way to end it. But thank you
absolutely.
For being a wonderful guest. A second time, like I say, next time you get the smoking jacket.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it.
That's all the time we got. Dropping the mic, and we are out. Hey, guys, thanks for listening to or watching the Changemaker podcast today. Greatly appreciate it. If you're listening and you want to see the video, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Deke Copenhaver. That's pretty easy to remember, I would think. But really, we also want to remind you to like, subscribe, rate across all platforms, download. And if you're looking for a coach, a speaker, or anything, you know where to find me. Just email me at deacon@dekecopenhaver.com. And thanks so much for listening.